On October 6th, Suzanne Clark Simpson, a 51-year-old mother of 4, along with her husband and one of their children, attended a birthday party at the Argyle, a top private club in Alamo Heights, Texas, from 6 to 8:30 p.m. This is a photo of her taken from security footage at the Argyle. No one at the happy event for the privileged would have guessed what she was about to endure that night, though one attendee, Heather Affleck, would later tell police that there was a verbal altercation between Suzanne and her husband Brad at the party. On her way home, she and her daughter stopped at the H-E-B grocery store just 10 minutes later. They left the store 11 minutes later. They drove the 2-minute drive home just up the street a few blocks, so they would have been home by 8:42 or 8:43. Not quite 20 minutes later, Suzanne called family friend and fellow realtor Graham Matthews and asked if she could come over at 9:15. 1 minute later, at 9:16, she called her mother, Barbara Clark. She told her mother that Brad had just assaulted her, injuring her arm and her back. Her cell phone service had been suspended at the request of the subscriber, who of course was her husband Brad. He would later tell police that she'd lost her phone at H-E-B when she stopped there on her way home. His phone, however, would later show that he was accessing the AT&T app at the very moment her phone was suspended. Suzanne spoke to her mother for 8 minutes, ending the call at 9:24 and arriving at Graham Matthews' home 1 minute later, as surveillance cameras would show. With her phone suspended, we don't know what time she returned home, but her daughter Chandler would later use the Find My Phone app to try to locate her, and it would register her phone's last location at home at 10:22. The numbers have been updated. In 2023, 51,100 women and girls were killed by intimate partners or family members across the globe. Be it over a dowry, punishment for perceived misconduct, or any other ridiculous excuse. That's one of us every 10 minutes. We broke a record. It's the highest numbers ever recorded. Congratulations. We lose. I'm Kassidy O'Connell, and this is Dying to Be Loved, the disappearance of Suzanne Clark Simpson. Welcome. The last time she was seen alive was by a neighbor 40 minutes later at 11 o'clock. He reports that he witnessed a loud physical confrontation between Suzanne and her husband Brad, who's described as a tycoon. Both Suzanne and Brad were realtors. They both had strong connections themselves, and even more through family connections in the real estate business. Brad also had owned a list of failed businesses, but we'll get to those details later. This neighbor witnessed Suzanne attempting to leave, and Brad preventing her from doing so. The neighbor heard screaming just outside his window and went to look. He saw Brad restraining her, and at some point, Suzanne broke free and began running west. He lost sight of them. I just want to say, I have to wonder if he had simply banged on the window and hollered, "Hey, is everything okay?" Or some kind of sound to make his presence known. Perhaps it could have saved Suzanne's life just by the simple fact that Brad would have known that someone was witnessing his actions that night. Personally, I would have been filming it and yelled, "Hey, I'm live streaming this on Instagram. Let her go." But that's just me. The neighbor states that next he gets a flashlight to go outside to look for them. But inexplicably, when he hears her scream 3 times, he goes back in the house and does nothing. No call to 911, no calls to a friend, no hollering out, "Hey, where'd you guys go? Are you okay?" Nothing. Well, I shouldn't say nothing because he does continue to watch out the window for a while. At 11:09, Brad shuts down his phone. Not a simple turning off of the phone, but as FBI agents note, it's a rarely used mode called locked down that's usually done by a person who wants to avoid detection. At 12 a.m., the same neighbor sees Brad start his black GMC pickup truck and leave. He's gone for about an hour. His pickup truck is caught on surveillance cameras at 12:33 in the parking lot of H-E-B, the same grocery store Suzanne had been to earlier. With his phone in lockdown mode, his movements are not easy to track, and for the next couple of days, the police will rely heavily on surveillance camera footage. During this trip to H-E-B, the store surveillance cameras record that in the bed of his truck, there is only a large cooler and no other cargo. At 7:15 the next morning, Suzanne's cell phone pings at a business parking lot. It's several blocks south of the grocery store. At 7:53, Brad's truck shows up on surveillance video dropping off the 5-year-old daughter who had attended the party with them the night before. The school surveillance video shows 2 large white garbage bags with red string handles in the bed of his truck. These had not been seen during his 12:30 a.m. run to the grocery store. His phone is still on lockdown mode, so he's not seen again until 9:12, not quite an hour and a half later, when his truck is seen at a restaurant called Whataburger, where he purchased food with his debit card. The map shows it's a 33-minute drive, so that left Brad with about 45 to 50 minutes unaccounted for in between the time he dropped his daughter off at school and headed in this direction. In that time, his truck has been filled with more items, as detected from the Whataburger surveillance camera, which shows that his truck now contains an additional white garbage bag, bringing the count to 3, a large gray heavy-duty garbage can, and a large bulky item wrapped in a blue tarp, with a large silver-colored metal firewood rack on top of it, partially concealing it and holding the item down. The item concealed in the tarp is also secured by a strap. The officer reporting all this explains that with his experience from past investigations, that this appears to be a similar manner to how he's seen victims be concealed and transported. I think we all know exactly what was in that tarp, but we'll leave it at that for now. In the same shopping area as the Whataburger, there's a Home Depot, where we have the next surveillance camera footage of Brad. At 9:53, he purchases 2 bags of Quikrete cement, a Home Depot construction bucket with a lid, a box of 32-count large trash bags, 1 bottle of Clorox disinfectant, and insect repellent. He pays in cash. Camera footage in the parking lot show the same items that were observed at Whataburger and the additional items that Brad has just purchased at Home Depot. He's observed speaking to a man in the parking lot as he's leaving. The man is found through the help of the FBI and reports that Brad randomly approached him and asked him for directions to the nearest dump. The man looked it up on his phone and shared the directions with Brad. Brad leaves Home Depot at 10:07. Kendall County Solid Waste is 8 minutes away, and surveillance footage catches him driving away from the facility. Over an hour after leaving Home Depot, Brad shows up again at the Valero gas station at 11:15. It's a 7-minute drive from the waste facility. He uses his debit card to buy gas and then uses cash inside to buy 2-gallon jugs of water, keeping in mind that he bought 2 bags of Quikrete cement and a bucket at the Home Depot. On this video, the white trash bags are no longer in the truck, but the garbage can, the cooler, and the blue tarp concealing an object with the firewood rack on top of it are still there. He's also recorded changing from sandals to cowboy boots. He turns his phone off and on a few times during his time here. Between those signals and different surveillance video, his truck is captured in Medina, Bandera County, and not seen again until 1:41 as he re-enters Kendall County. At this time, the blue tarp is no longer in the truck bed and the firewood rack has been repositioned. At 3 p.m., he receives a call from his daughter's school saying she hasn't been picked up. He arrives at the school at 3:27. He's once again picked up by their cameras, and it's confirmed that the blue tarp is no longer on the truck. The firewood rack is gone as well. The cooler and garbage cans still remain. At 4:07, he shows up at the Bubble Bath car wash. Their surveillance cameras catch him washing his truck. Dried cement splashes can be seen in the rear passenger compartment and in the truck bed. The Clorox bottle of disinfectant is observed in the rear passenger compartment. All that remains in the truck bed now is the cooler that was observed the night before by itself and throughout the day with the other items. After he washes his car, he simply goes home. He doesn't show any concern that Suzanne didn't pick their daughter up from school. He doesn't show any concern that she's not home or that he hasn't heard from her. Meanwhile, her friends are wondering where she is, and they have good reason to be worried. Her friend and banker, Gabriella Spezia, will later tell the police in an interview that in August, 2 months before her disappearance, Suzanne made an outcry to her, and it's probably worded this way in the hopes of getting it allowed into the court as an outcry exception and not being excluded by the hearsay rules. Because, as we saw, for example, in the recent South Carolina case where Terry Lewis had made a statement to police that her husband had sexually assaulted her, beat her, and had continued to throw a lit piece of red fabric at her until she caught fire. Unfortunately, As with many domestic violence victims, she didn't live long enough to make this statement in court. And so, to protect his Sixth Amendment right to cross-examine a witness, her statement was not allowed in court. The jury never heard about it and produced a not guilty verdict. Hopefully, Suzanne's outcries will be admissible because what Gabriella told police was that Suzanne told her that Brad abuses her, that he would take her phone and tell her children she lost it. She also chillingly told Gabriella that if she goes missing, to look for her in a lake. Again, this happened 2 months before she did in fact disappear. Another friend, Elizabeth Thomas, would later tell police that Suzanne had told her that he was very jealous and that he would track her via her phone. Back on September 17th, weeks before the murder, he'd sent Elizabeth a message saying, "I still feel bad about tonight. I never should have grabbed her phone and drove off, but she was so protective of it. My dumb butt didn't know her passcode, so I got locked out and had to bring it back. I really have no interest in looking through her phone or anybody else's. These devices are the devil." I find that rich, coming from a guy who, as it will turn out, actually had 3 phones. I already mentioned the first friend who saw them have a verbal altercation at the birthday party. It seems she was beginning to get the abuse out in the open, letting it be seen, telling multiple people about it, visiting the neighbor immediately after it happened, and calling her mother to tell her. These are signs that a woman is finally done hiding and therefore taking the abuse. This is the time when a woman is in the most danger because even if the abuser doesn't love them anymore, doesn't want them anymore, doesn't consider them worth anything, they can't take the loss of power and control of letting them go. Suzanne's friends know that she would never abandon her kids, so they're becoming increasingly worried about not being able to contact her. One of her friends, Sonny Woods, finally tells Brad she's reporting Suzanne as a missing person, and she does so at 9:57 p.m., no doubt realizing at this point that it's going to look bad for him that he hasn't been the one to report it to the police. Brad finally calls at 10:11 and leaves a voicemail stating that he hasn't seen his wife all day. When patrol officers go out to speak to him that night, he tells officers Maldonado and Davila that he had not seen her since 11 p.m. the night before. Keep that point in mind. A lot happens on October 8th. The police are fully investigating at this point, and they notice the discrepancy in his statements about seeing her that morning, because when he spoke to Chief Villegas, Brad tells him that he peeked into a separate room and saw her asleep at 6:30 as he was preparing to take their child to school in the morning. This is also when he tells police that she lost her phone at H-E-B the night before. These statements are recorded on police body cam footage. Then 2 very big events happen simultaneously, completely different, completely unrelated, but these 2 events will blow the case open. The first one happens at 4:35 p.m. Brad texts his friend, James Valley Cotter. For some background, Brad and James have been friends for over 20 years. The Cotter family owns a large corporation that, according to Brad's LinkedIn profile, he served in as vice president from July 2000 to November 2012. Without diving too deep off topic, in June of 2012, Brad's last year at the company, he and James hatch a scheme. James' father, James F. Cotter, owns a lot of business property. Large business properties need maintenance like cleaning. Brad and James, who do not own the company at all, create and attempt to manage their own cleaning company as a side way to make money off the business. Turns out, the other executives at Cotter & Sons are not pleased with the work that their company produces and cut ties. Brad and James now own a cleaning company with nothing to clean. Rather than just close it up, they decide to sell it to a company called National Building Service. Brad and James' company has no value. It was formed simply to make money off the Cotter Corporation, and it had failed its task. It's basically worthless. So in order to make the sale, Brad and James promised National Building Service an exclusive contract with the Cotter & Sons facilities, which is a huge job. The problem is, they have no legal right to make this deal. Neither of them had a say in who's hired to maintain Cotter's properties. Cotter Corporation cuts ties with National Building Services, who then understandably cry foul, saying that they were bribed to buy this worthless company and that they were unaware that neither Brad nor James had the authority to have made such a contract in the first place. The case goes to court, Also happening during this time, other parts of the company that James was overseeing end up filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Most of Brad's other businesses fail as well. He's also a realtor in an agency owned by family members, but on his own, he has the opposite of the Midas touch. The case goes to trial. Brad and James lose and owe National Building Services $1 million. They appeal, and surprisingly, the Texas Supreme Court finds in their favor, reverses, and remands the case back to court for a new trial. The plaintiffs' National Building Service dropped the case. They've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, and at this point, if they have to do that again, the suit win amount would not even be worth it. This situation of these well-connected, affluent families, Brad's privileged life, his failure to successfully run a business, but always having family to bail him out, reminds me so much of Alex Murdaugh that it feels like one big deja vu. His friend James Cotter reminds me of Alex's co-conspirators, Russell Lafitte and Corey Fleming. But back to the timeline. At 4:35, Brad texts Cotter, "If you're in Bandera, can you haul Bud and meet me at your house? I don't have much time." Now remember, this is the second day his wife is missing. He's not out looking for her. He's not calling everyone he can think of to ask if they've heard from her. He's not going to the store where he claims she lost her phone to see if it was turned in, to see if maybe, hey, did somebody pick up her phone and track her and find her? None of the things that a not guilty husband would be doing. He's not even crying to the police, begging for their help. Instead, he's trying to meet up with his buddy. Why? Cotter replies, "I'll be there in 40 minutes. Brad says, "Okay, make sure and leave all that stuff in the pump house. Especially the gun." Adding, "Sorry for the urgency, but you're all I got. Especially now. Social media is destroying me." The other event happened 2 minutes after the first text, when staff notify police that during the school day, Brad and Suzanne's 5-year-old daughter tells school staff that she witnessed her father hit her mother in the face and shove her into the wall. She said she saw a bruise on her mother's elbow. She also told him that he took her mother's phone. You know, the one Brad had told the police that she lost at the grocery store? The police begin preparing an arrest warrant and continue collecting evidence. Meanwhile, while Brad's busy with his friend, he misses his follow-up interview with the police. At 8:31 p.m., Cotter texts Brad saying, "Get over here. I won't tell anyone." And in a second text, he adds, "You're my brother." At 9:50 p.m., the police question the neighbor who witnessed the physical altercation and heard the screams. They also launch a search in nearby wooded locations. 2 articles of interest are found, but those are awaiting forensic analysis to determine their relevance to this case. The arrest warrant and search warrant are obtained at 12:42 a.m. It's now October 9th. The offenses for the arrest warrant are unlawful restraint, as witnessed by the neighbor who saw Brad restraining Suzanne, and assault, family violence, as witnessed by the neighbor and the daughter. The Almost Park Police and the Texas Department of Public Safety arrive at the family home on Almost Drive to execute the arrest and search warrants at 1:30 a.m. Brad is not home, but this is when they speak to the housekeeper and confirm the type of garbage bags they use are white with red string handles as seen in the back of Brad's truck. Another daughter tells police the damage they observe on the wall at the bottom of the stairs is recent and she had not seen it there before the fight. The police are told that Brad is at the family's second home, which is in Bandera County. And before we look at that map, think about this. His wife is missing. His kids are surely distraught. The youngest one is in kindergarten, and he's not home with them or doing anything to find their mother, his wife. Instead, he's at their second home. Why? Now this map might look familiar to you, and it should. Let's remember the routes that he took the morning after Suzanne disappeared when he was driving around with a tarped object, a burn rack, when he stopped at Whataburger to get food. Remember, he went to Home Depot to get bleach, cleanser, garbage bags, a bucket, and cement. He stopped to get gas, changed from sandals to cowboy boots, and was seen driving around Bandera and Medina, which is also the area he had texted his friend about. Besides of the times he was caught on surveillance camera, he would also open his phone from time to time. And so his phone pins him in that area that day. Now this is a different county from where they live, so this time it's up to Texas Rangers and a Bandera County Sheriff's Office to execute a search warrant on this other home. They find him there. Where? Standing over a burn pile. Guess what's in the pile? 3 cell phones and a laptop. A Texas Department of Public Safety criminal analyst later identifies these items as belonging to Brad. The analyst states that according to his experience, this is how criminals often destroy evidence to impair or hinder an investigation. Brad is arrested on the spot. Police state that he does not seem surprised about the arrest, nor does he ask why he's being arrested. Brad has numerous lacerations and bruises on his hands and arms upon inspection. He again repeats that Suzanne lost her phone at H-E-B grocery store. The officers note he appears unconcerned about his wife being a missing person. They say he shows little to no emotion, and when they begin to ask him about the altercation that was witnessed by the neighbor, he invokes his right to counsel. When he's brought in, he smiles for his mugshot, which is always a creepy thing to do, especially when your wife is missing and everyone who loves her is in deep despair, hoping and praying to find her. The analysis of his phone shows that he created 2 notes on the previous night. One is entitled Last Will and Testament, and the other is This Next Life. He apologizes for assaulting Suzanne in August of 2023 and again on Sunday, the night of the altercation. I'm assuming we'll see more about these notes during the actual trial, as for now I'm sure the police are being very careful about how much evidence they release. On October 10th, they search his truck and find stains that test presumptively for blood, which later is discovered to be his own. Also on the 10th is when law enforcement interviews James Cotter and retrieves the messages between him and Brad. One more important thing on October 10th is that one of Brad's family members notifies law enforcement that Brad owns multiple firearms and they want to surrender them to the police. They discover one of his guns was manufactured in Slovakia and is unlawful to own without a register with the NFRTR. A criminal complaint is filed on October 11th citing this unlawful possession of a firearm that's not registered to him. Penalties for this offense are up to 10 years imprisonment, a $250,000 fine, and a maximum of 3 years supervised release. This crime allows for a motion for detention and for continuance so that Brad can be held on these charges while they continue the investigation. Without these charges, they could not have held him for very long. On October 11th, they began searching Interstate 10, where Brad was observed with the item in the tarp, then later observed without the tarp after traveling to the Medina area. On October 12th, authorities obtain a warrant to search Bexar County landfill. On October 14th, they search Eastside landfill. On October 16th, Brad's family issues a statement that his parents are shattered, that Brad's refusal to cooperate is unacceptable and not how he was raised. They state that they have stepped up to take care of the children and that they will cooperate since Brad will not. On October 17th, the landfill search is called off and they state that no evidence had been found. On October 20th, an informant notifies police that Cotter, who in text messages with Brad said he wouldn't tell anyone anything, did in fact tell someone that Brad had asked him to go and retrieve an AK-47 and hide it. Police come to his home with a search warrant, and Cotter denies this. But they have a trusty canine agent with them, and he begins barking at a wall that's holding a TV in Cotter's bedroom. The TV is removed, and a hole is made in the wall where they retrieve a Chinese-made AK-47. On October 21st, James Cotter was then arrested for tampering with the evidence with the intent to impair an investigation. Also on October 21st, Brad writes a letter asking for changes in his bond conditions to allow him to see his children. The current conditions forbid it. October 23rd is when Gabrielle Especia was interviewed by police and told him about the outcry of domestic violence and the statement that Suzanne had made that if she turns up missing, to look for her in a lake. A couple of other things happen on the 23rd. For one, James Cotter files a motion for bond reduction. And during a police search of the Simpson home, 1 bag of cement, a box of trash bags with 4 bags missing, and a metal firewood rack were found. These were the items seen in the truck and also purchased at the Home Depot the day Brad drove up to the dump and around the Medina area. October 30th is the date when an interview of another of Suzanne's friends told police that Brad would track Suzanne's phone. On November 4th, a bond hearing was held for Cotter. His attorney argued that the bond was excessive and unconstitutional. It was continued to allow time for Cotter's mother to give the court information about Cotter's financial situation. The next day, on November 5th, Suzanne and Brad's older daughter shared stories on Instagram stating, "My mom was a victim of abuse from my father." She states, "My father took my mother's life in a state of rage and control. In our community, this should not be happening, and I will not stop speaking as the voice of my mother until she is found. I will forever represent all victims of domestic abuse and assault. On November 7th, while still in custody from his prior arrests, Brad is arrested for Suzanne's murder. The document was originally sealed to protect the integrity of the investigation. This mugshot is even creepier than the last one. Imagine just having been arrested for your wife's murder and smiling like this for the camera. Also on November 7th, Cotter's bond is reduced. The very next day, November 8th, he's released from jail after paying cash for his bond. When he was originally arrested on October 21st, he was given 2 felony charges, one of evidence tampering and the other illegal possession of a weapon. But a look at his court documents shows that the prosecutors are now only moving forward with the weapons charge, which is a Class 2 felony. The conditions of his bond is that he will have full house arrest, and he was also ordered to wear a GPS tracker. He will also be required to submit to random drug and alcohol testing, and he is not allowed to possess a firearm. On November 14th, Brad's attorneys filed a motion requesting an examining trial. This examining trial was supposed to take place on December 9th. What is an examining trial? It's put in place to make sure that someone who has been arrested is not a victim of unlawful detention, and so the evidence is examined in open court. It's not a real trial, there's not a jury, but if the court finds that the evidence does not support the arrest, the suspect can be let go. Now, under Texas law, if there is a grand jury indictment, it will block the examining trial from taking place. Because that's what a grand jury does in the first place. It decides whether the evidence is strong enough to go forward with the case, thereby ruling out the need for any other sort of examination. But before this hearing can take place, the grand jury actually indicts Brad, so there's no longer a need for the examining trial. Next, Brad's lawyer files a motion to quash the indictment, saying that the information that led to the indictment is vague, indefinite, ambiguous, and does not inform Brad of the nature of the proof against him. I think even the arrest affidavit makes the point pretty clear. But he claims, since he doesn't know how the state intends to prove that Brad murdered Suzanne, that he's not able to prepare a defense. On December 5th, news outlets report that the indictment indicated that a concealed reciprocating saw was found to contain Suzanne's DNA. It doesn't give the details of exactly what type of DNA that was, but it does report that he had attempted to conceal this saw. On December 9th, there was a court hearing held. It was very, very brief. Nothing was decided.
2024 CR 012097 and 2024 CR 12095 state this is Brad Chandler Simpson. Okay, will the attorneys please identify themselves?
Casey Sandoval for the state of Texas.
Stephen Gilmore from Mr. Simpson.
Okay, and sir, are you Brad Chandler Simpson?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I want the record to reflect that I scheduled this hearing today because I became aware that Mr. Gilmore was going to be out of town. Normally we do it 3 weeks out, okay? So I didn't know, since the case is new to this court, whether or not there were pending matters. I know that was a motion for examining trial, which is moot at this time. And in addition, there's a motion to quash the indictment, which I think we'll litigate at a later date, correct, Mr. Gilmore?
Correct, Judge.
Okay. And from the state, is there anything further that we need to address today before Mr. Gilmore leaves for the rest of the year, whatever the case may be?
Not at this time, Judge.
Okay, Mr. Gilmore?
Nothing at the moment, Judge.
Okay, then for now, then we'll go ahead and just reset the case, and you'll get a date from Ms. Tamayo, okay?
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you all very much.
May we be excused?
Yes, you may be excused.
Appreciate
Thank you.
But there we learned that Brad's lawyer will be unavailable until February, so this motion to quash was submitted but will not be decided until his return. The next hearing will be a closed one on December 19th, and it's closed because it's about the custody of the minor children. With Brad's attorney away, the next court hearing for the murder will be on February the 12th. So that's all we know for now, but we do know that Brad's family is being very outspoken in their support of Suzanne and their disappointment in Brad. So even his own family knows that something is not right here. I will keep you updated on this case as new developments come along. Till then, this is Kassidy O'Connell saying stay well and stay tuned. And may I also add, stay safe.